Welcome, today's story is full of drama. Like and subscribe to stay updated. Let's get started.
I had slipped unnoticed and gotten a drink from the bar, and then I had moved to a dark corner where I could unobtrusively watch the goings-on. The lateness of the hour and the cleared tables suggested that the dinner part of the festivities was over, and more than likely so was all the speechifying and the dispensing of bonuses. Now it was more of a cocktail party. The tables had been moved back to create a dance floor, and a five-piece band was setting up. My attention was centered on the reason I had come to the affair. I watched as she moved through the crowd, talking to the people and looking for all the world like she was the hostess. I sensed him before he spoke. She sure is something, isn't she? I turned and saw a short, ruddy-faced man standing to my left and slightly behind me. He stuck out his hand. Jake Branson. I work out of the Austin office. I took his hand and introduced myself and said, "You know her?" "Not near as well as I would like. I came close once, but close only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades, right?" I was intrigued by his statement. "You came close? How is that? You new to the company? You don't know who she is?" "I'm just a guest." "Well, little Clara there is the boss private stock. But when the mood strikes him, he will share. The Austin branch has been the poorest producing branch in the company." One day, the boss and Clara flew into town. The boss had all the sales guys come into the office for a meeting, and then he read us the Riot Act / 2014 turn the place around, or he would shut the office down and we could all go looking for new jobs. Then he said, "But to give you a little incentive, I'll make it interesting and throw in a prize for the highest producer. Clara, show the boys what the winner will get." Clara did a strip for the boys that would have put a professional stripper to shame. Then the boss said, "One night with Clara to the highest scoring salesman." I missed by a lousy $1,200. My sales were $1,587,000. But Harris beat me by $1,000. Harris / 2014, that's him over there / 2014, said that Clara showed him what heaven would be like. Hey, there goes my regional manager. Got to go suck up. He left me standing there staring at my wife and wondering if I knew her at all. It was Clara's company Christmas party and I wasn't supposed to be there. I was supposed to be in Miami on business, but things moved a lot faster than expected, and I was able to fly home 2 days earlier than planned. I tried reaching Clara to let her know, but her office had closed for the day, and all I got at home was the answering machine. When the plane landed, I saw that there was still enough time to hit the party, have a couple of drinks, and then take Clara home and try to make up for a week of going without. Now, I didn't know if I should even bother going home at all. The idea that my wife was the company 304 was ludicrous at first glance, but Jake had not equivocated at all when he made his statements. Clara was the executive secretary to Liam Perkins, the president and CEO of the company, and she did travel with him when he visited the outlying offices. She had made 3 trips to Austin that year. My heart was crying out, but my gut was saying, check it out. I stayed in my corner and nursed my drink and watched Harris. After half an hour, he did what I was waiting for. He put his drink down and headed for the bathrooms, and I set my glass down and followed him. Luckily, he was the only one in the bathroom when I walked in. I stepped up to the urinal next to the one he was whizzing in and I looked over at him. "Harris, right?" He nodded and said, "Do I know you?" "Nope, never met. But you are my hero." He gave me a funny look, like he thought maybe I was trying to hit on him, and then said, "Why am I your hero?" "Because you scored Clara Beckman. Do you know how many guys in the company would cut off their left hand just to have coffee with her? You got to spend a whole night with her. I got to tell you, that puts you pretty high on the list of people I'd like to be like." I saw the relief on his face when he realized I wasn't trying to pick him up, and he smiled. Just the luck of the draw. Jake Branson was $12,000 ahead of me going into the last day of the contest. I told all my customers about the contest and the prize, and almost all of them kicked their orders up $1,000 or $2,000. That gave me just enough to ace out Jake. "Hey, if you ever get a shot, you had best lie, cheat, steal, or do whatever you have to do because she is totally worth it." He started searching for his wallet, and when he found it, he pulled out a Polaroid photo and showed it to me. "I keep this to motivate me on slow days," he said. It was Clara all right in a very revealing shot. "Man," I said with a hint of envy, "some guys have all the luck." "Yeah, and some guys end up getting hurt in the end, especially the ones who trust too much," he replied. I retreated to my quiet corner and settled in to watch. Clara didn't expect to see me for another 2 days, and I was curious to see what would unfold. As the party started to wind down, I made my way to the hotel lobby and sat where I could keep an eye on the ballroom doors. Liam and Clara were the last to leave, and I had a newspaper in front of me pretending to read as they passed by. I overheard Liam say, "Leave yours here and pick it up in the morning. No, you can follow," and then they were out of earshot. I guessed that Liam was going to follow Clara to our house, and I needed to beat them there so I could erase the answering machine tape. I drove like a madman and broke every speed limit in town. Any that caught me, I ran, and all a stop sign was to me was something to look at as I blew by. I parked around the corner and ran to the house, let myself in, and dashed for the answering machine. I hit play, and as soon as my message started, I hit the delete button. Then I hurried to the hall closet where I kept the camera bag. I took out the Nikon and checked to see what I had left on the roll, and then I took the camera bag and ran up the stairs. I set the video camera up where it wouldn't be noticed and then focused it on the bed. At the last minute, I remembered the little red light and ran to the bathroom to get a bandage to cover it. 5 minutes later, I heard the garage door opener start to run, and I left the bedroom and moved to the head of the stairs and peeked around the corner. Clara came in and headed straight for the wet bar and fixed a couple of drinks. About 2 minutes later, Liam let himself in the front door. The scumsucker had a key to my house. Clara walked over to him, handed him a drink, and tilted her face up for a kiss. Liam took the drink and then bent and gave Clara a kiss on the lips that seemed to have a little tongue action with it. Then the two of them went over and sat down on the couch. "I think everything went well tonight. You did a great job as usual," Liam said. Clara grinned. "That's why you pay me the big bucks." "No, it isn't, and you know it. I pay you the big bucks because you are the hottest piece this side of the Rockies. Your performance in other areas has been a surprising bonus. Speaking of which, I hope you were satisfied with what you received." "You were more than generous, Liam. It could have been more, especially considering how captivated Hargrove was last night. He couldn't stop praising you." "Did he stay until morning?" "Yes, and I barely got any rest because of it. He definitely knows how to push boundaries. Tonight you'll have to make do with just BJ's and maybe a little more." "I thought you'd never ask," Clara said with a grin, standing up and getting ready. Clara downed her drink and then kneeled in front of him. "All the way?" "Yeah. I want to start the night off right." "How long can you stay?" "All night. My wife is staying with her sister for 3 days." "How long before I have to be out?" "You can stay until tomorrow night. My husband gets back at 2 the next day." "Why can't I stay tomorrow too? I want to be fresh when Marcus gets home." "Are you sure he doesn't suspect anything?" "No, he doesn't. He trusts me completely." Then she lowered her head and continued. Liam leaned back on the couch, a satisfied smile coming across his face. I wanted to storm over there and punch him, but I kept my anger under control. I would get my revenge, but I'd do it my way. I had seen too many friends go through painful divorces, getting hurt by the courts and lawyers, and I was determined that wouldn't happen to me. But I needed the right pictures, and I needed Clara to get Liam into the bedroom where the camera could record them. Pictures with sound are far more useful than stills, but I still needed the Nikon for backup. Down on the couch, I saw Liam and Clara doing their deeds. "God, baby, you are the absolute greatest at that," Liam said as Clara stood up and started stripping. When she was down to just nylons and high heels, she did a slow turn in front of him. "You like?" "You know I do, baby. I can't get enough of you." "That's good, lover, because Clara is excited tonight. So, let's get upstairs and see what you can do to help me resolve my problem." Liam got up off the couch, and with Clara leading the way, he headed for the stairway. I moved back to the bedroom and got in the closet, and moments later, the two of them entered the room. Clara went right to the bed and waited for Liam. He got on the bed with her. I don't believe I had ever seen a more erotic sight than Clara. Erotic, but not what I was looking for in the way of photos. After several minutes, Clara said, "Are you ready, lover? Let's do it." "I'm ready, lover." Screw my brains out. I was on edge. I wanted to burst out of the closet and start taking pictures with the Nikon, but I wanted as much video as I could get. I most especially wanted the portions where Clara was screaming out Liam's name. I had to force myself to stand there and watch and listen. Liam started getting vocal and said some provocative things to excite her. "Who's your daddy?" "You are, baby, you are." "Is your daddy better than your husband?" "Much better, baby, much better." "Who has the big one, baby?" "You do, daddy." I'd heard and seen enough, and I pushed open the closet door and moved toward the bed. I got 5 good exposures before the two of them realized that they weren't alone. Suddenly, Clara was screaming and struggling to get out from under Liam, and Liam was scrambling to get away from Clara and off the bed. I just kept moving around and taking pictures until I ran out of film. Liam ran out of the bedroom and down the stairs to where his clothes were, and a minute or two later, I heard the front door slam. On the bed, Clara was crying and trying to talk at the same time. "What are you doing here?" She said more as an accusation than as a question. "You're supposed to be in Miami." "Yeah. Well, Clara, I guess you just can't depend on me for nothing. What are you going to do?" "I'll check into a motel tonight and see a lawyer first thing in the morning. After that, I'll step back and take a look at what's left." "Why are you going to see a lawyer?" "Because that seems to be the way that you go about getting a divorce." "Divorce?" "Yes, sweetie, that is what usually happens when one partner in a marriage catches the other being unfaithful. And from what I've learned tonight, you have been unfaithful in bunches. I'll have the lawyer arrange for a time when I can come back and pick up my stuff, preferably with you not here." I turned to leave, and she cried out, "Don't go, Marcus. I can explain. It isn't what you think." I just kept on walking. I was not surprised when I went into work the next morning to find 7 messages for Clara on my voicemail. I deleted them and got to work. Around 9, my secretary stuck her head in my office. "I have your wife on line 3. I was all set to tell her to disconnect and to not take any more calls from Clara. But then I thought it would be unfair to Nancy to put her in the middle. I lifted the handset and pressed the button for line 3. "Yes. Come home, Marcus." I cried all night. "I love you, honey, and I need you here." "Tough, Clara. I don't want to be anywhere near you. Can we at least get together and sit down and talk?" "I don't see any need, Clara. I heard enough last night just listening to you and Liam. I can't for the life of me think of what you could have to say that would make what I heard irrelevant." "I don't know what you heard, Marcus, but I can explain if you will just give me a chance." "Okay, Clara. Where and when?" "I don't want to do it in public, Marcus. Just come home tonight, and we can talk." "I'll go along, Clara, but you need to know that I know a whole lot more than you might think. The first time I catch you in a lie or even shading the truth a little, I'm gone." "Fair enough. I'll be there by 6. I arrived at 6:10 and found Clara sitting at the kitchen table, an open bottle of white wine in front of her and 2 filled glasses on the table. "Getting me drunk isn't going to help, Clara. I know. But maybe the wine will loosen a little of the tension." "There is no tension on my side of the table, Clara. Just a regret that something that I thought was so good was really rotten to the core." "Please, Marcus, give me a chance to explain. It isn't what you think." "Let me tell you what I think, Clara." "No, make that let me tell you what I know. I know you are a 304. I know of 3 men who you have screwed this year, and from what I've been hearing, the number is probably considerably more. I saw you screwing Liam. I heard you tell him how much Hargrove liked screwing you, and a man named Harris was all too happy to show me a naked picture of you and tell me what a marvelous night he spent with you. A contest prize? For God's sake, you were a contest prize for some geek from Austin. What can you possibly say to make those things go away?" "Okay, Marcus, I get the picture. I'm a 304, a round-heeled 304, the company punchboard. But there is a reason for it all, and that's what I want to explain. It won't make it go away, and it won't heal wounds, but I need for you to know why I did what I did, even if you won't accept it or understand it." "All right, go ahead. I'm listening." "I'm ambitious, Marcus. I want more out of my life, at least job-wise. I busted my butt to get to be Liam's secretary so I could use it as a springboard, and it was working, at least until last night. I haven't seen or spoken to Liam since he left the house last night, so I don't know what my status is right now. Jerry Winters is retiring next month, and Liam was going to give me Jerry's position. I'd be vice president of sales and the odds-on favorite to take over as president and CEO when Liam decides to hang it up. So, I did a few things that were outside the bounds of our marriage, but so what? I wouldn't be the first woman who slept her way to the top. Besides, it isn't like it cost you anything. You were never home. Are your skirts clean, Marcus? You never got a taste of strange while you were out there on the road doing business for your company." "Yes, Clara, my skirts are clean. I had chances, lots of them. Women who were dangled in front of me like you were dangled in front of Hargrove. But I always said no, Clara. I always said no because I knew I had something better waiting at home for me. But I guess I really didn't, did I? Of course you did. I love you, Marcus, you know that. You have to know that. We couldn't have been together as long as we have without you knowing it. What I did while you were gone didn't change the way I feel about you. It sure didn't sound like it last night. I distinctly heard you shooting me through the grease while you and Liam were bouncing around on the bed. Honey, that was all. While you were taking pictures, did you happen to notice the size of Liam's weenie? It is half the size of yours. Like most men who feel they are inferior on some level, Liam needs his ego stroked. That's all it was, honey. Just to make Liam feel better about himself. Nothing more. Marcus, I swear it doesn't change anything. Clara, you are still a cheating wife and a 304. What is so goddamned important about you being a VP or getting to be president and CEO? I make more than enough for the two of us. You never had to go to work in the first place. That's where you were wrong, Marcus. I need the security that climbing the corporate ladder will give me. So now, on top of everything else, you're saying that I'm not a good provider? Oh, you're a great provider, Marcus, now. But what about next year or the year after that? You are a heart attack, Marcus, just looking for a time and place to happen. Your job and the way you do it are going to kill you, Marcus. You are on the road 3 weeks out of 5, eating bad food and sitting in lounges and drinking in the evenings because you have nothing better to do. When you come home, you spend 10 or 12 hours a day at the office and still bring work home to do in the evenings and on the weekends. When you go, Marcus, and I'm standing there looking down into the casket, all I'm going to have are memories, equity in the house, and $500,000 in life insurance. $500,000 sounds like a lot, but it isn't. If I try to keep the house, I'd have to use a lot of it to pay the mortgage off or at least down far enough that I could refinance and get a payment that I could afford to make. Taxes being what they are would take some of it, and then I would have to pay off all of our debts because I couldn't make the payments on an executive secretary's pay. I wouldn't have much left, and I'd still have to work to get by. Well, you are right about one thing, Clara. You are certainly going to need the security because we are through. There might have been a chance, a real small one, that we might have survived your having an affair. I could maybe understand and forgive that, but I can't accept what you have been doing. No way. If you try to divorce me, Marcus, I'll fight you every step of the way. I'll get the best divorce lawyer around, and I'll fight it. I love you, and I know that you love me, and I know that we can work through this. You won't fight me, Clara. You know why? Because of your precious security, that's why. Right now, you can go to Liam and say, I'm free, lover. We don't have to sneak around behind Marcus's back anymore. Who do you want me to screw next? But if you fight me, I'll drag you and Liam through the mud. I'll see to it that his wife gets copies of all the photos, and when she's done with Liam, you'll be lucky to have a job at all, let alone a position as a vice president. It is your choice, Clara, and if I were you, I would think long and hard about it. Now, as long as I'm here, I'm going to go upstairs and pack a few things. I grabbed a bag and tossed some shirts and underwear in it, and then I got the video camera from where I'd hidden it and tossed it into the bag. Then I headed back downstairs. Clara was standing at the bottom of the stairs with tears running down her cheeks. Please, Marcus. Please don't do this. I love you, Marcus. Honest to God, I do. We can work things out, honey. Just give it a chance. I shook my head and said, Goodbye, Clara, and walked out. The next morning, I showed up at Liam's office bright and early. So early that he wasn't even there yet. I was sitting in a chair just outside his office door when he arrived. His face turned pale, and his step faltered when he saw me, but he quickly put on a show of bravado. You are the last person I would have expected to see here. I came to make you an offer you can't refuse. When I left his office, I had secured Clara's security for her. She would get the vice president of sales position, and all I had to do was promise that the photos I took would never be seen by Liam's wife. I told him he had that promise as long as he treated Clara fairly. Treat her right, and you will never hear from me again. Screw her over, and not only will your wife see the photos, but everybody else will too. Why are you doing this for her? I would have thought that under the circumstances, you would have gone after her like Attila the Hun scouring the steppes of Russia. Once upon a time I loved her and she loved me. That has to be worth something. She still loves you. What she did has nothing to do with how she feels about you. Maybe not, but it does to me. The divorce was final 2 years ago. I get cards from Clara on Christmas, Easter, Valentine's Day, Sweetest Day, my birthday, and any other holiday she can find a card for, and they are always signed. Much love, Clara, with a PS, please call me sometime. I miss you. So far, I haven't. She got her VP slot and has since been promoted to executive vice president in charge of operations. In a case of supreme irony, Liam's company bought out my company, and I am presently working in the department headed by my ex-wife. Everyone in my old company knows that there will be reorganization in the near future and that a lot of positions will be eliminated because of duplication. I have no idea where I am sitting on the totem pole, but won't it be a major kick in the butt if my seeing to Clara's security costs me mine? Sitting here reading the interoffice memo brought back memories I'd hoped would never resurface. Clara, my ever-loving and faithless 304 ex-wife, is now the head of my department, my immediate superior. How ironic is that? I should have known something like this was going to happen, but I was just relieved to be out of the marriage. Now it was back to haunt me tenfold. Clara had said that I was a heart attack just waiting for time and place, and she was right. My doctor had warned me, but I hadn't taken all that much notice, believing that what I was doing wasn't all that bad. I mean, everyone works hard to provide for their family, don't they? I knew Clara was ambitious. Her needs and wants were many. Take that oversized mansion we lived in, the pool in the back, along with the country club membership that sat collecting dust in her home office drawer that neither of us had time to use. It was my job to provide, or so I was brought up to believe. The once love of my life would now be back in a position to control my life again. This was the final act to snap me out of my apathy, as there was no way I could even consider working under her. Not after finding out how many men she had, and maybe still is, working under. I finished dropping the final bits and pieces into the box and picked up my letter of resignation. As I walked out of my office for the last time, I dropped the letter, my company cell phone, car keys, and company credit card on Nancy's desk. It's been really nice working with you, Nancy. I really wish you all the best. You're an asset, and I want to thank you for all your help. You take care, and don't let that witch push you around. If she gives you any grief, then you have my permission to use me as a threat to get a fair go. So, you're leaving then, Marcus? This isn't just an idle threat? She inquired, waving my letter in front of her face. Yes, Nancy, you know as well as I do that I couldn't work for her. I can't work with anyone I don't respect, and as you also know with all the gory detail that she killed any chance of me respecting her. I'll miss you, Marcus. You know she's going to be pissed as hell when she finds out that you've up and pulled the pin. She's been pumping me for weeks about your workload and schedule. I haven't said anything to her that I wasn't required to, but I did feel as though I was stabbing you in the back. I'm sorry. I should have said something sooner. I smiled. Don't worry about it. You have to protect your job, and there's nothing you could have said that would have made an ounce of difference. I knew the writing was on the wall when that memo came around about the merger. There's nothing I did here that I need kept secret, as you well know. How do I act? What do I tell her when she asks where you are? Nancy asked. I grinned. Just tell her the truth. Exactly what you know. She can't get upset about that. Do what she asks as long as it doesn't go against your own values. It's been truly a pleasure, Nancy. I'll keep in touch, I promise. I told her as I shook her hand and then kissed the back of it. I was getting into my car just as a black limo pulled up in front of the office block and Clara got out with two well-dressed men, looking for all the world like a high-status, no-nonsense businesswoman when, in fact, we all knew better. She was nothing more than an overpaid, high-class hooker with a title. Clara was looking very professional in her business suit, but then she always did look good in anything she wore. She looked around but didn't see me, and that was how I wanted it. I sat there for another minute or two to let her get into the building before I pulled out of the parking lot for the last time. I'd already settled up all my affairs, sold off what needed to be sold, and put all the rest into storage. My doctor had said I needed a change of scenery, so I finally decided to take his advice. I spent the next 3 months driving around, sightseeing, and unwinding from the stresses of work. I ended up in a small town just this side of nowhere. The climate was moderate, the townsfolk friendly, and the fishing great. I rented a little 3-bedroom cottage with a workshop annex next to the lake, with the option to buy. It had everything I needed to start my new life. Sitting on the back deck, sipping on a cold one, I thought for the first time about how Clara was taking my disappearance. I decided to give Nancy a call the next day to see how much fallout there had been from my sudden departure. Hi, Nancy, it's Marcus here. How's it going in the salt mine? Marcus, so good to hear from you. I was starting to worry that you'd fallen off the end of the earth. I laughed out loud, sitting out on my deck, watching the water lazily lap against my private pontoon. Not quite falling off, but the view from here is, to say the least, spectacular. The wishing you were here line applies. How are things back there? Oh God, Marcus, you certainly know how to set the cat among the pigeons. Clara has been on a rampage. She's been going through the company like a packet of salts, and there have been layoffs left, right, and center. Daniel Paxton left last week after having a confrontation with her. I don't know what it was about, but she moved him from logistics to archives, basically shunned him into a windowless office in the basement. And as you can imagine, Daniel wouldn't take that, so he handed in his resignation and walked out. I'm sorry to hear that. Daniel was a good man, probably one of the best in his field. What the hell is that woman doing? If she's not careful, she's going to sink the ship before it gets out of the harbor. How's she been with you? I heard Nancy giggle. In 2 words, Marcus, hell frustrated. She tried to fire me that first day because I let you go before she got to talk to you. As if I could have stopped you. And I told her so. Then she said that because I now no longer had a boss, I wasn't needed and to pack my things up and get the hell out. I stood there and told her to go ahead and try to fire me. I'll have you and the company in court so fast she wouldn't have time to fix her makeup before the court appearance. I then told her what you said, and she went quiet. It seemed like it had never occurred to her that her rise to the top would eventually come back to haunt her. Nancy burst out in a fit of giggles before continuing. So now I'm the secretary to the executive vice president in charge of operations. I think it has something to do with keeping your enemies closer than your friends. I told her I expected a substantial pay rise to go with the promotion. I don't think she was pleased with that either because she just sneered. But in the end, I got what I wanted. I was in 2 minds as Nancy related all the latest gossip. On one hand, I was pleased that my going did have an impact on Clara's plans. Don't get me wrong. I made this life change for my own good, as it was something I needed to do, and Clara's appearance was just the kick in the butt I needed to put an end to my procrastination. This latest development was just icing on the cake, so to speak. Still, I was worried that it would impact everyone else in the long run, and that wasn't my intention. The next morning, I realized I was out of sugar and decided to head to the little convenience store a short ways down the road. Their property actually bordered mine with an open paddock in between. As I approached, I nearly ran into a young couple leaving the store and quickly offered my apologies before stepping inside. Behind the counter was a harried woman in her early 20s, trying to calm a whimpering baby while simultaneously managing the store. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice tinged with exhaustion as the baby's whimpering grew louder. Just then, a couple of cars pulled up to the gas pumps outside. She sighed in frustration. "Where the hell is Jillian when I need her?" I offered a smile. "Can I help instead? My name's Marcus, and I live just up the road. Junior over there sounds like they need attention, and all I need is some sugar. If it's okay, I can help with the customers while you handle the baby." The woman, visibly relieved, introduced herself. "I'm Ella, and I'd be so grateful for the help, Marcus." I headed outside to assist the travelers filling their tanks, washing windshields, and making small talk while Ella attended to her child. Returning to the counter, I laid the money down beside the cash register, just as another customer entered and started browsing the store. While Ella worked on settling the baby, I wandered over to the browsing customer. "Can I help you with anything, sir?" I asked. "Just looking at your selection of fishing rods," he replied. "I'm traveling through and had to put my car in the shop for repairs. Looks like it'll be an all-day job, so I thought I'd get some fishing in to pass the time." He looked like a businessman, clean-cut and formal. He could have been me a year ago. I noticed he was eyeing the cheapest rod and reel combos, so I asked, "Do you fish often?" He shook his head. "Not really, though I'd like to if I could find the time." Couldn't help but chuckle. This was what I was good at, convincing people to see the value in something worthwhile. I helped him pick out a better quality rod, explaining how it would improve his chances of catching fish and enjoying his downtime. By the time he left with his purchase, I felt a small spark of satisfaction, a feeling I hadn't experienced in months. Ella emerged from the back room, looking far more relaxed now that her baby had settled. "Thank you so much, Marcus. Why is it that things only get busy when you can least afford it? Bessie doesn't usually fuss at this time of day, and Jillian is always here by now." I chuckled. I'd have to explain quantum mechanics to answer that, and since I have no idea what that's about, you'll just have to take a wild guess. Maybe you and your husband need to hire more reliable help. The moment the words left my mouth, I saw Ella's face fall. She hesitated before replying, her voice softer. "I'm a widow." Ella explained that her husband, Greg, had been a member of the Army Reserves and had died in a training accident. The truck he was riding in flipped over during maneuvers, killing him instantly. The worst part, she said, was that Greg never even knew he was going to be a father. Bessie had likely been conceived the night before he left. Ella wiped away a stray tear. Greg would have been a good father. He had so many plans, this store being one of them. She gestured around the store and the land it sat on. Over the next few weeks, I made a habit of stopping by the store to help out whenever I could. It wasn't just about lending a hand, though Ella appreciated it. It was also about finding a sense of purpose again. Something about the small, simple interactions in that store felt grounding. Ella was funny, kind, and genuinely grateful for the support, and Bessie's cheerful giggles whenever I showed up were a reminder of the innocence and joy I'd been missing in my life. I know what you're probably thinking, and you're probably right. Ella was a good-looking woman, and my hormones hadn't exactly been satisfied in a while. But more than that, helping out at the store gave me back something I hadn't realized I'd lost a sense of worth. Clara's betrayal had destroyed more than just our marriage. It had made me feel like I wasn't enough, that I couldn't provide for the people I cared about. Ella, without even realizing it, was giving me a way to rebuild that part of myself. One afternoon, after a particularly busy morning at the store, I was on my way home when my phone rang. I recognized the number immediately. It was Sophie. "Hello. You're lucky you're not a receptionist, Marcus," Sophie teased. "Your phone manner would get you fired in a day." "Hi, Sophie," I chuckled. "Sorry, you caught me off guard. It's almost 7 at night. Is there an emergency?" Sophie sobered up. "Not exactly an emergency, but I wanted to give you a heads up. Clara's putting a private detective on your tail." I sighed. Jesus Christ. She's still at it. "Yep, she's desperate to find you. She asked me to arrange it, but I figured I'd warn you instead. If you want to stay below the radar, now's the time to lay low." "Thanks, Sophie. I appreciate the warning. Any idea why she's doing this?" "She's losing it, Marcus. She's been working insane hours trying to turn things around at the company, but it's clearly taking a toll. She looks 10 years older and has put on at least 10 kilos. She's frantic, Marcus. Like she doesn't know what to do anymore." "Let her stew," I replied. "She made her bed. Now she has to lie in it." Sophie giggled softly. "You sure know how to push her buttons. But seriously, Marcus, take care of yourself. Okay? I'll keep you updated if anything else comes up." "Thanks, Sophie. I owe you one." After hanging up, I leaned back in my chair and stared at the ceiling. Clara's desperation didn't surprise me, but Sophie's tone made me pause. Was I being too cold? Did I owe Clara a chance to explain herself again? No, I decided. Whatever she was dealing with now, she'd brought on herself. My focus needed to be on moving forward, not looking back. A few days later, I stopped by Ella's store as usual. She was at the counter, Bessie perched on her hip, chatting with a customer. When she saw me, her face lit up. "Marcus, you're just in time. I've got a plumbing issue in the back I was hoping you could look at." "Plumbing, huh? You're lucky I'm a man of many talents," I joked. Ella laughed and handed Bessie off to her older sister, Jillian, who had finally shown up for her shift. As I followed Ella to the back room, I couldn't help but think how different my life had become in such a short time. Helping Ella fix a leaky faucet might not have been glamorous, but it felt real. Felt like home. The leak in the back room was minor. Just a loose pipe fitting that took all of 10 minutes to fix. But Ella stood nearby the whole time, watching with a mix of curiosity and appreciation. When I was finished and turned the wrench one final time, she smiled. "Thanks, Marcus. I swear, I don't know what I'd do without you." I grinned, wiping my hands on a rag. "Probably call a plumber and pay way more than it's worth." She chuckled. "True, but I think I'd miss the company more." Her comment caught me off guard, but I brushed it off with a light laugh. "Well, I'm glad to be of service." As the weeks passed, my visits to the store became more frequent. Not just for errands but for Ella and Bessie. The routine was comforting, and the three of us slowly fell into an easy rhythm. Ella and I never talked about Greg much, but his presence was still felt in little ways. Photos on the wall, the way she would occasionally pause mid-conversation, lost in a memory. One evening, as I was locking up after helping her close the store, Ella hesitated at the door. "Marcus, can I ask you something?" "Of course," I replied, pocketing the keys. "Why do you do this?" she asked, gesturing vaguely at the store and the now dark parking lot. "I mean, you're here all the time, helping out, fixing things. Why?" The question caught me off guard, and I took a moment to think before answering. Because I like being here, I said honestly. I like helping you. It makes me feel useful. Ella's expression softened, and she nodded. You are useful, Marcus. More than you know. It was a quiet night at home when my phone rang again. It was Sophie. Marcus, she's done it, Sophie said without preamble. Done what? I asked, already bracing for the answer. Clara hired the PI. He's been asking questions about you around town. I thought you should know. I sighed. Thanks for the heads up, Sophie. I'll keep an eye out. I'm sorry, Marcus, Sophie added. I don't know why she's so obsessed. I mean, she's the one who... She's desperate, I interrupted. She knows she's sinking, and she's grasping at straws. But don't worry, I can handle it. Sophie hesitated. She's not the same, Marcus. I know she messed up big time, but she's unraveling. It's hard to watch. I didn't know what to say, so I simply thanked her again and hung up. Clara's actions were her own, and whatever she was going through now wasn't my responsibility. Still, a small part of me couldn't help but feel a twinge of pity. A week later, I was sitting on the back deck of my cottage, watching the sun set over the lake, when Ella joined me with 2 glasses of wine. She handed me one and took a seat beside me, her gaze fixed on the water. Busy day? I asked, taking a sip. She nodded. Always, but I don't mind. It keeps me distracted. From what? I asked, though I already had an idea. Everything, she admitted. Greg. The store. Life. I nodded, understanding all too well. Distractions aren't always a bad thing. No, they're not, she agreed. But sometimes I wonder, am I moving forward? Or just running in place? The vulnerability in her voice surprised me, and I set my glass down. Ella, you're doing the best you can. And from where I'm sitting, you're doing an incredible job. She smiled faintly. You're kind, Marcus. Too kind. Not kind, I corrected her. Honest. For a moment, we sat in comfortable silence, the only sounds coming from the gentle lapping of the water against the dock. Then Ella turned to me, her expression serious. Do you ever think about starting over? She asked. Every day, I admitted. And I think I already have. Ella looked at me, her eyes searching mine for a long moment. Then she smiled. A genuine, heartfelt smile that made something stir deep inside me. Me too, she said softly. The days slipped into weeks, and Ella and I continued to fall into an unspoken rhythm. I'd help her at the store when she needed it. We'd share conversations over dinner or a quiet drink on the deck, and we'd both navigate the small-town life that seemed to suit us so well. Bessie, her daughter, had taken to calling me Uncle Marcus, which warmed me more than I expected. One evening, after the store had closed, Ella invited me over for dinner. Bessie was already in bed, and the 2 of us sat across from each other at her small kitchen table, eating a simple but delicious meal she had prepared. The conversation was light, mostly small talk about the town and the customers we'd seen that day, but there was a warmth in the air, a comfort that felt increasingly familiar. When the plates were cleared, Ella leaned back in her chair, nursing the last of her wine. You know, Marcus, you've done more for me in the past few months than anyone has in years. I don't think I've properly thanked you. You don't need to, I said quickly. You've done more for me than you realize. Being here, helping out, it's helped me find some peace. Ella tilted her head, studying me with a small smile. Peace, huh? Does that mean you're finally letting go of the past? I paused, her question cutting deeper than I'd expected. I think I am, I admitted. It's not easy, though. Clara, everything with her, it left a mark. But this, being here, feels like a new beginning. Her smile grew, and she reached across the table to place her hand over mine. Well, for what it's worth, I'm glad you're here. I don't know what I'd do without you. A few days later, I got another call from Sophie. She sounded more frantic than usual. Marcus, I don't know how to tell you this, but Clara's really falling apart, she said. She's been showing up at work late, snapping at everyone, and today, she just broke down in the middle of a meeting. She's in bad shape. I sighed. Sophie, I don't know what you want me to do. Clara made her choices, and she's dealing with the consequences. I can't fix that for her. I know, Marcus, but I think she needs help. Real help. And honestly, I think hearing it from you might make a difference. Her words hung in the air, and for a moment I didn't respond. Part of me wanted to say no outright. Clara was no longer my responsibility. But another part, the part that remembered the woman I had once loved, felt a pang of guilt. "I'll think about it," I said finally. "But I'm not making any promises." A week later, Sophie called again, this time with an update. "She's in the hospital, Marcus," Sophie said. "She had a breakdown at work, and they admitted her for observation. I don't know if she'll listen to me, but I think you should talk to her." I closed my eyes, letting out a heavy sigh. "Fine, I'll go." When I arrived at the hospital, Clara was sitting in a chair by the window, staring out at the rain. She looked smaller somehow, like the weight of the world had finally crushed her. When she turned to see me, her eyes filled with tears. "Marcus," she whispered, her voice trembling. I stepped into the room, my emotions a mix of pity, anger, and something I couldn't quite name. "Clara." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she broke down, her shoulders shaking as she sobbed into her hands. I stood there, unsure of what to do, before finally crossing the room and placing a hand on her shoulder. "I didn't come here to yell or to dredge up the past," I said quietly. "I came because Sophie said you needed someone to tell you the truth." Clara looked up at me, her face streaked with tears. "What truth?" "The truth is, you need to let it go," I said. "The job, the power, the ambition. It's killing you, Clara. It's time to stop fighting and start living." She nodded slowly, her expression a mix of relief and sorrow. "I don't know how," she admitted. I sighed, pulling up a chair to sit beside her. "You start by forgiving yourself, Clara. And then you figure out what really matters to you." Clara sat quietly for a long time, her hands trembling slightly in her lap. The tears had stopped, but the weight in her expression was unmistakable. I stayed silent, giving her the space she seemed to need. Finally, she spoke. "I made such a mess of everything, Marcus. With us, with my career, with myself. I don't even know who I am anymore." "You're not the first person to lose their way, Clara," I said gently. "But you can find your way back. It's not too late, but you have to let go of the things that don't matter, the things that are dragging you down." She looked at me, her eyes searching mine for something. "Maybe forgiveness, maybe hope. Do you think I can? Do you think there's still something left for me?" "That's up to you," I said. "But yeah, I think there is. You just need to stop looking for validation in the wrong places. You don't need a fancy title or a big house to matter. You just need to be Clara." Her lip quivered, and she looked away, her gaze returning to the window. "I wish I'd realized that sooner. I wish I hadn't lost you." I didn't respond right away. Instead, I leaned back in the chair, letting her words sink in. "We can't change the past, Clara. All we can do is learn from it and try to do better going forward." She nodded, though her expression remained heavy. "Do you hate me, Marcus?" "No," I said without hesitation. "I don't hate you, Clara. I was angry, furious even, but I've let that go. Life's too short to carry that kind of baggage. I want you to be okay, Clara, but I can't fix you. You have to do that yourself." She reached out then, her hand brushing mine lightly. "Thank you for coming. I didn't think you would." "I wasn't sure I would either," I admitted. "But Sophie convinced me you needed someone to talk to. I'm glad I came." Her lips curled into a faint smile, the first I'd seen from her in what felt like forever. "I don't know where I'll go from here, but I'll try, Marcus. I'll try to find myself again." "That's all anyone can do," I said, standing up. "Take care of yourself, Clara." As I walked toward the door, she called out softly, "Marcus." I turned, meeting her gaze one last time. "Yeah, I'm sorry," she said, her voice breaking. "For everything." I nodded. "I know, Clara. Take care." I left the hospital feeling a strange mix of emotions. On one hand, I was relieved to have finally confronted the lingering tension between us, to have laid the past to rest. On the other hand, I couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness for the woman Clara had become, a shadow of the vibrant, ambitious person I'd once fallen in love with. But I reminded myself that her journey was no longer mine to bear. She had to find her own way, just as I had found mine. Back at the cottage, Ella greeted me at the door, her expression warm but curious. "How did it go?" she asked, handing me a cup of coffee as we settled onto the deck. "It went as well as it could," I replied. "She's struggling, but I think she's starting to realize that she needs to let go of the things that were dragging her down. Ella nodded thoughtfully. That's a big step. It is, I agreed. But it's her step to take. Ella reached over, placing her hand over mine. And what about you? Are you okay? I looked at her, a small smile tugging at the corner of my mouth. Yeah, I think I am. For the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Her smile widened, and she leaned her head against my shoulder. Good, because I like having you here. Over the next few months, life settled into a peaceful routine. Ella and I grew closer, our relationship deepening with each passing day. Bessie had officially started calling me Dad, and hearing it filled me with a sense of pride and joy I hadn't felt in years. We expanded the store, added a small cafe for the locals, and even started renting out cabins by the lake to tourists. As for Clara, I heard from Sophie that she had taken a lower-level job within the company, a fresh start in a quieter role. She'd sold her mansion and moved into a modest condo closer to work. Sophie told me that Clara seemed lighter, freer, as though the weight of her past ambitions had finally lifted. It wasn't the life she'd once envisioned for herself, but it was hers, and from what I heard, she was making the best of it. One summer evening, as Ella and I sat on the deck watching the sun dip below the horizon, she turned to me with a mischievous smile. You know, she said, I think you've finally found your happy ending. I laughed, pulling her close. I think I have too, and for the first time in years, I felt whole. The months rolled by, and the peaceful rhythm of our life became the foundation I hadn't known I'd been craving. The lake, the store, Ella, and Bessie. All of it grounded me in a way my old life never had. Ella and I had settled into a natural partnership, building not just a life together but a future. The fishing resort we'd been working on started to take off, especially after word of mouth spread about the quiet charm of the place. We upgraded the cabins, added more docks, and even started hosting small events for the locals and tourists. Ella had a knack for connecting with people, and her warmth made everyone feel welcome. Bessie had become the unofficial mascot of the resort, running around with her boundless energy and charm. One evening, after a particularly busy weekend of guests, Ella and I sat on the deck, exhausted but happy. Bessie had already gone to bed, and the lake was calm, the last hints of twilight reflecting off the water. Ella leaned back in her chair, her glass of wine in hand, and let out a contented sigh. You know, she said, I never thought I'd feel this settled again. After Greg, I didn't think I'd ever have this. I reached over, taking her hand. You deserve it, Ella. You and Bessie both. You've given me something I never thought I'd have either. A second chance. She smiled at me, her eyes soft. I think we've given each other that. For a moment we just sat there, the silence between us comfortable. Then Ella spoke again, her voice quieter. Marcus, have you thought about making this official? I turned to her, surprised by the question. You mean? Yeah, she said, her cheeks flushing slightly. I mean us. I know we've been building this life together, but I guess I want to know if you're ready to take the next step. My heart swelled as I looked at her, this incredible woman who had brought light back into my life. Ella, I don't think I've ever been more ready for anything. Her smile widened, and before either of us could say another word, I leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't a grand proposal, but it was perfect. Just us, together, in the life we'd built. The wedding was small and intimate, just a handful of close friends and the locals who had become like family. Sophie and Daniel were there, of course, and Daniel gave a surprisingly heartfelt toast at the reception. To Marcus and Ella, he said, raising his glass. Proof that sometimes life gives you a second shot when you least expect it. Here's to love, family, and the future. The crowd cheered, and I glanced at Ella, who was beaming beside me. Bessie perched on her hip in her flower girl dress. For the first time in as long as I could remember, everything felt exactly right. In the months that followed, life only grew richer. Ella and I expanded the resort further, adding a small event space and hosting weekend fishing tournaments. Bessie thrived, loving her role as the center of attention among the guests, and Ella and I welcomed a new addition to our family, a baby boy named Brady. Watching Bessie dote on her little brother was a joy I hadn't anticipated, and our family felt complete. As for Clara, I occasionally heard updates from Sophie. She was still working at the company, in a much smaller role than she'd once had, but she seemed content. She'd found a new rhythm for her life, one that didn't involve chasing power or titles. Sophie mentioned that Clara had even started dating again. Nothing serious, but it sounded like she was finding her footing. I was glad for her. I didn't hate her anymore. If anything, I hoped she found the peace she needed. One quiet afternoon, as I tinkered in the workshop, Bessie came running in, holding a crayon drawing she'd made. "Daddy, look, it's us!" she exclaimed, handing me the paper. I knelt down, taking the drawing. It was a simple but heartfelt picture of our family. Ella, Bessie, Brady, and me, standing by the lake with a big, colorful sun in the sky. "It's beautiful, Bessie," I said, ruffling her hair. "You've got real talent." She grinned. "Mommy says we're the happiest family in the world." I smiled, pulling her into a hug. "She's right, kiddo. We are." And as I looked at the drawing again, I realized just how true that was. Life might not have turned out the way I'd planned, but it had turned out exactly the way it was supposed to. Life settled into a beautiful rhythm, the kind of simplicity that felt like it had been written just for us. The resort continued to thrive, and Ella's warmth and hospitality became legendary among the regulars. Bessie, now 6, was growing like a weed, and Brady was hitting all his milestones with the determination of a little explorer. One morning, as the mist rose off the lake and I was doing some light maintenance on one of the boats, Ella walked down to the dock holding 2 steaming mugs of coffee. She handed me one and leaned against the railing, looking out over the calm water. "Did you ever think you'd end up here?" she asked, her voice carrying that morning softness that I loved. "Not in a million years," I admitted, taking a sip of coffee. "But I wouldn't trade it for anything." She smiled and turned toward me. "I've been thinking. The kids are happy, the business is doing great. Maybe it's time we take a little break for ourselves. A trip somewhere." "A trip?" I raised an eyebrow. "Where would we go? I feel like this place is already paradise." Ella chuckled. "It is, but even paradise needs variety sometimes. Maybe somewhere tropical? Or a cabin in the mountains. Just the 2 of us." The idea was tempting, though I hesitated at the thought of leaving the kids. Ella seemed to sense my reluctance and added, "Sophie said she and Daniel would be happy to watch Bessie and Brady for a few days. They're practically family." I smiled, imagining Sophie wrangling our 2 energetic kids. "I'm sure they'd love that. Let's talk to them and see if we can make it happen." A few weeks later, we found ourselves on a plane to the Caribbean. A trip Ella had secretly been planning for months. It was the first time we'd taken time for ourselves since the wedding, and the change of scenery was as refreshing as it was exciting. The beach was pristine, the sunsets were breathtaking, and for the first time in years, we felt like carefree newlyweds. One evening, as we sat on the balcony of our beachside villa, Ella leaned her head on my shoulder and sighed. "I don't think I've ever been this happy." "Me neither," I replied, wrapping an arm around her. "I think we finally figured it out, Ella. What matters, She nodded. "Family, love, peace. It's all I've ever wanted. And now I have it." We sat there in comfortable silence, the sound of the waves below lulling us into a state of contentment. For the first time in as long as I could remember, there were no worries hanging over us, no unresolved tensions from the past. It was just us, in the moment, exactly where we wanted to be. Back at the resort, things were as lively as ever. Sophie and Daniel had done a wonderful job holding down the fort and taking care of the kids. When we returned, Bessie greeted us with a drawing she'd made of the family, complete with palm trees and a sun with sunglasses. Brady babbled excitedly in Ella's arms, as if telling her everything he'd missed. Sophie pulled me aside while Ella was busy with the kids. "Marcus, I have to say, you and Ella are doing something special here. This place has a way of making people feel like they belong." "That's the goal," I said with a smile. "It's more than a business to us. It's home." "And it shows," Sophie replied. "I'm proud of you, Marcus. You've come a long way." As the years went on, the resort grew into a community of its own. We added more cabins, built a playground for the kids, and even hosted annual events like summer fishing tournaments and holiday barbecues. Bessie, now a teenager, helped out around the resort, while Brady, still young but eager, followed me around with a tiny toolbox, fixing things alongside his dad. Ella and I often marveled at how far we'd come. The life we'd built wasn't perfect, but it was ours, and it was filled with love, laughter, and the kind of peace we never thought we'd find. Occasionally, I'd hear updates about Clara through Sophie. She had stayed in her quieter role at the company and had even started volunteering at a local shelter. She seemed to have found her own version of peace, though Sophie hinted that she still asked about me from time to time. One day, Sophie sent me a card from Clara. It was simple, just a few lines thanking me for my honesty that day in the hospital and wishing me well. I didn't respond, there was no need, but I was glad to know she was doing better. On a particularly clear evening, Ella and I sat on the deck, watching the stars as Bessie and Brady played in the yard. The laughter of our children echoed across the lake, a sound that always made my heart swell. "Do you think we've done it?" Ella asked softly. "Built the life we always wanted?" I looked at her, the love of my life, and then at our children, our home, and the life we'd created together. "Yeah, Ella, I think we have." She smiled, resting her head on my shoulder. "Here's to the rest of it, then." "To the rest of it," I echoed, lifting my glass to hers. And as the stars twinkled above and the sounds of the lake filled the air, I knew, without a doubt, that this was the life I was meant to live. The years passed, and life remained a tapestry of growth, laughter, and quiet satisfaction. The resort became something of a landmark in our little town, a place people from all over came to relax, connect, and find the kind of peace Ella and I had discovered. Word of mouth spread, and soon enough the place was fully booked most weekends. It wasn't just about fishing anymore. It was about the sense of belonging that Ella, the kids, and I had cultivated there. Bessie, now in her late teens, had started talking about college. She'd grown into a thoughtful, ambitious young woman, and Ella and I couldn't have been prouder. Brady, still full of youthful energy, idolized his big sister but also spent most of his time following me around, learning the ins and outs of the resort. He loved helping with the boats, often bragging to the guests about how he was Dad's right-hand man. One particularly warm summer evening, as Ella and I prepared for the resort's annual barbecue, Sophie and Daniel arrived with their 2 boys in tow. Daniel had become something of a surrogate uncle to Bessie and Brady, and Sophie, as always, came armed with her signature apple pie and an endless supply of stories from the city. "Look at this place," Sophie said, gesturing around the bustling resort as guests mingled near the grills and kids splashed in the lake. "You've really created something special here." I smiled, glancing at Ella, who was busy setting out plates and drinks. "It's not just me. Ella's the heart of this place. And you're its backbone," Sophie replied. "The 2 of you make a damn good team." Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the sky turned a rich shade of purple, Sophie pulled me aside. "Have you heard from Clara?" she asked, her tone careful. "Not in a while," I admitted. "The last I heard, she was still volunteering and working part-time." "Why?" Sophie hesitated before replying. "She's different now. More grounded, I think. She talks about you sometimes. Says you were the reason she finally turned her life around." I nodded, unsure how to feel about that. "I'm glad she's doing better. She deserves to find her own peace." "She does," Sophie agreed. "And she wanted me to tell you, thank you, for everything." I didn't say much after that. Clara was a chapter in my life I'd closed long ago, but it felt good to know that, in some way, I'd been part of her journey toward healing. The barbecue was a success, as always, and by the time the last of the guests had left, Ella and I were sitting on the deck with Sophie and Daniel, reminiscing about old times. "Do you ever miss it?" Daniel asked, leaning back in his chair. "The chaos of the corporate world?" "Not for a second," I said, shaking my head. "This is where I belong." Ella smiled, reaching for my hand. "And this is where we'll stay." As the years rolled on, the resort continued to flourish, and so did our family. Bessie graduated college and moved to a nearby city, where she pursued a career in environmental conservation. A passion she said was inspired by her childhood on the lake. Brady, meanwhile, took an even greater interest in the resort, often talking about taking over the business one day. Ella and I grew older, but our bond only deepened with time. We still spent our evenings on the deck, watching the sunset and talking about the life we'd built. And as I looked out over the lake, the water reflecting the golden hues of the setting sun, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for Ella, for our children, for the second chance at happiness I never thought I'd have. One particularly quiet evening, as Ella and I sat side by side, she turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "Do you think we'll be remembered?" she asked. By who? I asked, smiling. By anyone, she said. By the people who come here, by our kids, by, I don't know, the world. I thought about it for a moment before replying. We'll be remembered by the people who matter, Ella. By Bessie, by Brady, by everyone who's ever found a piece of themselves here. That's all that really counts. She smiled, resting her head on my shoulder. I like that. And as the stars appeared one by one, their reflections dancing on the lake, I felt the weight of time fall away. It didn't matter what tomorrow would bring or how the world would remember us. What mattered was the life we'd built, the love we shared, and the moments like this, the ones that made everything worth it. The years passed, as they always do, bringing their steady changes. The resort became a legacy, not just a business. It was a place where families came back year after year, where old memories mingled with new ones, and where people found something they didn't even realize they were searching for. A sense of peace, connection, and belonging. Bessie married a few years after college. Her wedding held right on the shore of the lake, under the same sunsets she had grown up with. She looked radiant in her dress, walking down the aisle on my arm, her eyes sparkling with joy. Brady was her best man, grinning ear to ear as he handed over the rings. Ella cried happy tears the whole day, and I couldn't help but think how far we'd all come. Brady, true to his word, took over managing the resort as Ella and I grew older. He brought new ideas, expanded the business, and infused it with the same passion we'd always felt. He was more than capable, and seeing the resort in his hands gave me a kind of peace I hadn't expected. Ella and I started to slow down, spending our days in the quieter corners of the property, watching as the life we'd built continued to thrive. One particularly warm summer evening, as Ella and I sat together on the deck, the lake glimmering under the soft light of the setting sun, she reached for my hand. You know, she said, her voice soft, I think this is everything I've ever wanted. I smiled, squeezing her hand gently. It's everything I've ever wanted, too. More than I ever thought I'd have. She leaned her head against my shoulder, her presence as familiar and comforting as the breeze off the lake. Do you ever think about how it all started? How we got here? All the time, I said honestly. It wasn't an easy road, but every twist and turn led us here. And I wouldn't change a thing. We sat there in silence for a while, the sounds of the lake and the laughter of families in the distance filling the air. There was no rush, no need to speak. Everything we wanted to say had already been said 100 times over in the life we'd lived together. The years caught up with us, as they always do. Ella passed peacefully one spring morning, with the sound of birds singing outside and the smell of the lake drifting in through the open window. She was in my arms, her face serene, and her last words to me were simple, thank you for everything. In the days that followed, I found myself reflecting on the life we'd built. It wasn't sadness that filled me, though I missed her deeply. It was gratitude. Gratitude for the years we'd had, for the love we'd shared, and for the legacy she left behind. Bessie and Brady took care of me after that, though I often insisted I was fine on my own. They were as much a part of the resort's soul as Ella and I had been, and seeing them carry on what we'd started was a kind of comfort I couldn't put into words. One day, as I sat on the deck alone, watching the sun set over the lake, Brady joined me. He handed me a glass of iced tea and sat down beside me, his expression thoughtful. Dad, he said, after a moment of silence, do you ever regret anything about the life you've lived? I smiled, looking out at the water. No, I said simply. Every step I took, every choice I made, led me here. And here is exactly where I was meant to be. He nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. I'm glad you think that, because I think so too. We sat there together, father and son, the lake stretching out before us like a mirror reflecting the life we'd built. And in that moment, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the first stars began to appear, I felt the fullness of a life well lived. As the years continued on, I knew the resort would stay in the family, that the laughter and joy it brought would carry on long after I was gone. And that was enough. That was everything. The life I'd rebuilt with Ella, the love we'd shared, and the family we'd raised. That was my legacy. And as the gentle ripples of the lake shimmered under the moonlight, I knew I had found what so many people spend their lives searching for: peace, love, and a purpose worth living for.